She laughed in his arms, under red lights and cheap promises. That same night, she woke up in a hospital bed, with "property of a liar" carved into her back. Her lover? Barely breathing. And me? I was stirring my coffee across town, watching it unfold, exactly as planned. I'm Russell. I built a life on loyalty, and watched it crumble under a red coat and a fake smile. But I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I listened, I learned, and I let the truth burn louder than any outburst ever could. What would you do if the person you trusted most became your greatest betrayal? Drop your thoughts below, because some stories don't end with revenge, they begin there. Russell never wore cologne, but that morning, the faint trace of lavender in the hallway stopped him cold. It was subtle, not overpowering, just enough to make him pause halfway between the staircase and the kitchen, holding his breath like someone waiting for something to pass. He stood still, eyes narrowing, and turned his head slightly. The scent didn't come from the hallway runner, nor the coat hooks by the front door. No candles had been lit. No fresh laundry. It lingered low, near the floorboards, soft, clean, and floral. Lavender. The kind you'd find in a boutique lotion bottle, or a drawer sachet meant to freshen old sheets. But they didn't use lavender. Not anymore. On their honeymoon, Vanessa had wrinkled her nose at a lavender oil someone left on their bed at the inn in Maine. Too sweet, she'd said, pinching the little glass bottle between two fingers. Like fake love in a bottle. He remembered laughing. She tossed it into the trash and kissed him with lemon on her lips. That was nearly 30 years ago. He didn't laugh now. The smell drifted with him into the kitchen. Sunlight slipped between the blinds, lighting the dust and ribbons across the butcher block counters. The radio was already on, playing an old country song he hadn't heard since his mother's voice echoed through their house, "Blue Bayou." He let it play. The coffee machine grumbled its last drops into the pot. Vanessa stood by the fridge, glossy in black leggings and a slim white hoodie, her long hair pulled back. She was holding a container of Greek yogurt in one hand and scrolling her phone with the other. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Morning," he replied, watching her carefully. She turned, leaned in, and kissed him on the cheek. The gesture was automatic. Her lips barely brushed him, like she'd kissed a wall she'd walked past every day. Her breath held no coffee, just the light citrus tang of some morning spray. He stepped aside as she grabbed her car keys from the dish on the counter. "You heading out?" "Pilates," she said. "Laura's picking me up." "You'll probably still be here when I get back?" "I'm working on the plans for the Ellis porch this afternoon." She nodded, sliding her phone into her pocket. "Say hi to Graham for me." "Will do." Vanessa was almost at the door when he noticed her shoes. New sneakers. Clean. White with a red accent. The ones she said were too flashy when she tried them on at that outlet in Rutland. Now they hugged her feet like they belonged. As she pulled the door shut behind her, the breeze caught the bottom of her hoodie and fluttered it just enough for him to glimpse the hem of a lace camisole, black, not her usual. He stood alone in the kitchen, the scent of lavender lingering faintly on the air. Coffee ready, he poured a mug and sat at the table. His hand hovered over the ceramic handle. There was a small chip on the rim, something he'd meant to repair for over a year. He traced the imperfection with his thumb. He heard the garage door close. Vanessa hadn't parked inside, he realized. Must have left it open overnight. Or maybe she had driven herself and forgotten to mention it. As he moved to put cream in his coffee, something red caught his eye near the door. Her scarf, the wool one from their Boston trip 2 years ago, lay half-tucked behind the shoe rack. She hadn't worn it since winter. He picked it up. Lavender again. Stronger now. Fused into the fabric. Russell walked to the dining room cabinet and opened the drawer with his old leather notebook. The one he used to sketch renovations and jot quotes from books he never finished. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote in capital letters, "Lavender. November 3rd. He stood by the window, looking out into the crisp morning. Frost glinted along the fence line, and Graham Ellis, his neighbor of 2 decades, was crouched in his yard, watering a patch of dormant rose bushes. Too late in the season, but Graham insisted on treating his plants like people. You keep showing up for them even when they've gone quiet. He sipped his coffee and turned toward the garage. Maybe the scent was nothing. A new lotion. Maybe a sample sprayed at a store. But Vanessa didn't shop at stores with testers. She ordered everything online now, curated and scheduled. Russell pulled on his jacket and walked outside. The air was sharp against his face. He stepped into the garage and opened the passenger door of her car. The scent hit him stronger now. He leaned in, eyes narrowing, scanning the floor mat. Something caught the light. A bracelet. Leather, worn thin. A single silver clasp engraved with initials, DW. He held it up. The initials meant something. Or they didn't. But the weight of the leather told him it had been worn often. Recently. He didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Just held it in his hand and walked back inside. The house felt colder, even though the heater clicked on. The ceramic mug still sat on the table, steam now barely rising. He opened the drawer again, placing the bracelet gently beside a dusty old cassette labeled in fading ink, Mom, August 1994. Back inside, he slips the bracelet into a drawer beside a dusty cassette labeled, Mom, August 1994. At B.A.'s Beans, the barista greeted Russell with, 2 today? Cinnamon latte for your wife? He froze. Vanessa hated cinnamon. The warmth of the cafe wrapped around him like an old quilt, the kind with faint stains and familiar threads. Outside, wind chased crisp maple leaves along the sidewalk, their edges curling like burnt paper. Inside, voices rose and fell in low hums. A toddler squealed near the fireplace, 2 retired teachers shared a blueberry scone in the corner booth, and behind the counter, a teenager struggled with the whipped cream lever, laughing to herself. But Russell just stood there. The barista, tall, freckled, maybe college age, smiled politely and pointed to the note on the counter. It said cinnamon latte, right? That's the usual for Mrs. Brenner, yeah? His mouth was dry. He nodded slowly, pulling out his wallet. In 2012, during their anniversary trip to a bed and breakfast near Woodstock, Vanessa had bitten into a fresh cinnamon roll and made a gagging sound. It tastes like candles, she'd said, reaching for her water. He'd laughed and finished it for her. Since then, she wouldn't even touch French toast with a dusting of spice. B, the cafe's owner, came bustling out of the back room carrying a tray of cranberry muffins. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a low bun, and her sweater had a felt turkey pin near the shoulder. Russell Brenner, she said warmly. Haven't seen you in a while on a Sunday. He forced a smile. Trying to make the most of a quiet morning. B set the tray down in the glass case and leaned slightly closer, voice lowered. Vanessa's been in twice this week. That latte's growing on her, huh? He glanced at the chalkboard on the back wall. Names were written inside heart shapes, customer favorites. One read, Vanessa B., cinnamon latte. The chalk was fresh. His stomach tensed. Behind him, the bell above the door jingled. A woman entered, wearing a dark wool coat and a soft gray scarf. Her hair was pinned back, just loosely enough to look effortless. She ordered a black coffee and found a seat near the window, alone. She didn't pull out a phone, didn't scroll. Just watched. When Russell received his drinks, he turned to leave and nearly bumped into her. You're Russell, right? She asked, voice quiet but direct. He looked at her carefully. Her eyes were striking, not because of their color, but because of how still they were. Like someone used to waiting. I am, he said cautiously. I'm Lydia Wyatt. He didn't react, but he knew the last name. Wyatt. Dean Wyatt. From the footage. From the bracelet. She extended a hand. Just wanted to say, thank you for your patience the other day. I think I blocked your drive by accident. Russell nodded, playing along. Ah. The Subaru. No worries. She gave a small smile and gestured to the chair across from her. I know this is forward, but, would you sit for a moment? He hesitated, then lowered himself into the seat across from her. Outside, two teens passed the window, laughing loudly. One of them said, "Did you see that woman at Velvet Room Friday night? Vanessa something? Girls got moves." Russell stared past them. Lydia didn't comment. Instead, she stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking softly. She looked down, then back at him. We don't have to talk long. I just thought, if someone ever made you feel like you were the only one losing your mind, it might help to know, you're not. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached into her purse. She pulled out a napkin, wrote something with a steady hand despite the shake in her wrist, and slid it across the table. Tuesday. 4 p.m. same place. She stood before he could say anything more and walked out without another glance. The scent of bergamot lingered faintly in the air she left behind. Russell sat alone, staring at the napkin. Then he folded it in half and slipped it into his coat pocket. At home that afternoon, Vanessa returned with takeout containers and a too bright smile. She mentioned Laura. They'd ended up shopping instead of Pilates. Her lipstick was the same shade as the night he'd found the bracelet. Her eyes met his only when she spoke, then darted away. She handed him a sandwich he hadn't asked for. Chicken pesto. You love this. He nodded and ate silently. The scent of lavender clung to the bag she'd carried. That night, after she'd gone to bed, he retrieved a small case from the closet. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, beneath some bundled cords and a forgotten flash drive, lay a black memory card. He inserted it into his laptop. The screen lit up with a timestamp, Velvet Room, October 29, 10:12 p.m. The footage was grainy, low-lit, but clear enough. Vanessa appeared mid-frame, laughing, her body swaying to the music, her hands rising instinctively as someone came up behind her. Arms wrapped around her waist. She turned, smiled. Kissed him. Russell didn't blink. He paused the video, zoomed in slightly. The man's jawline. His eyes. He didn't need more proof. He leaned back, turned off the screen, and said softly, "Dean Wyatt." Vanessa's red coat shimmered under the club lights. Her hands weren't searching for keys. They were finding Dean. Russell sat in his study, wrapped in the flannel robe his mother had sewn decades ago. It was warm and soft, worn thin at the elbows but reliable. The amber glow of the desk lamp cast gentle shadows across the bookshelves, where architecture volumes leaned like aging companions. The smell of pine and lemon oil clung to the corners, Vanessa's old cleaning routine. She hadn't used it in months, but memory had a way of settling into wood. On the laptop before him, the screen flickered to life. The video loaded frame by frame, a tight angle, dim lighting, music low but pulsing beneath the silence. Vanessa entered from the right, her red coat catching and refracting the light like a signal flare. She didn't look hesitant. She didn't scan the room. She moved like someone who'd done this before. The Velvet Room's camera didn't lie. Dean was already there. Mid-40s, strong jaw, confident stance, hands tucked into his black bomber jacket. The moment Vanessa reached him, her posture changed. Shoulders relaxed. Lips parted into a smile Russell hadn't seen in years. The kind of smile that preceded inside jokes and unspoken permissions. She leaned in. Dean whispered something. She laughed, high-pitched and airy. Russell muted the sound, but he didn't need it. He remembered that laugh. She used it when she was pretending. At weddings, when she didn't know the groom. At fundraisers, when she wanted to impress people who didn't matter. It was a sound she saved for performance. She wasn't pretending with Russell anymore. She had stopped months ago. Dean handed her something small, palmed discreetly. A key. She slipped it into her purse without looking. He reached for her waist, pulled her in. They moved slowly to the rhythm of the music, heads close, hips closer. Her fingers traced his jaw like they knew the terrain. Russell exhaled through his nose and hit pause. The still frame caught Vanessa mid-laugh, her eyes half-lidded, mouth open. Dean was whispering something into her ear. Behind them, clubgoers moved like shadows in fog. He zoomed in. On Dean's wrist, a bracelet, leather, worn, unmistakable. The same one Russell had found beneath the passenger seat of Vanessa's car. The same shape, same clasp, same silver DW etched in. Dusty, their aging retriever, lifted his head from where he lay near the fireplace and nudged Russell's foot gently, then rested his chin atop it. A wordless kind of loyalty. Russell reached for the desk drawer, pulled out the bracelet, and placed it on the wooden surface beside the laptop. The fire crackled faintly in the corner of the room, heat muted by the soundproofed walls. Outside, the wind whistled faintly through the maple trees. Cold. His phone buzzed beside the coffee mug, breaking the stillness. One new message. Lydia Wyatt, you saw it. Meet me tomorrow. Same place. He didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, he clicked play again. Same footage. Vanessa's entrance. Her arms opening. Dean's hand sliding around her waist. That laugh again. He watched it 3 times. Then, without a word, he reached down and twisted the simple gold band from his left hand. His wedding ring. It left behind a pale line of skin, a groove worn into his finger by years of habit and hope. He placed it beside the bracelet. For a moment, nothing moved. The laptop screen dimmed automatically, throwing the room into soft shadow. Dusty exhaled deeply, a sound halfway between rest and concern. Russell leaned back in his chair and clicked on a voicemail, an old one saved from years ago, one he hadn't played in at least a decade. His mother's voice came through, crackly and low, like a memory trapped in static. Trust isn't tested in promises, Russ. It's tested in silence. He let the words hang in the air, letting them stretch across the warm room like a thread stitching time together. His mother had left that message not long before her diagnosis. He remembered the hospital. The smell of iodine and folded blankets. He remembered her hand, cold but steady. Now, her voice echoed across years in betrayal. Outside, a branch scraped the window. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Russell closed the laptop and folded his hands in his lap. Vanessa's coat still hung on the hallway rack. Red, radiant, loud. The key she'd received tonight? He didn't need to know what it opened. Some secrets revealed themselves without invitation. Dusty stirred again, then settled. Russell reached down and scratched behind the dog's ears. Trust isn't tested in promises, Russ. It's tested in silence. Lydia's kitchen smelled of cinnamon and quiet revenge. I've waited years to speak to someone who knows, she said. Russell stood just inside the doorway, fingers still curled around his coat buttons. The cottage was smaller than he expected, tight hallways, low ceilings, wood-paneled walls that gleamed with oil and memory. An antique clock ticked steadily above the fireplace, its hands moving with the kind of patience born of long-held grudges. Outside, bare trees swayed against a cold November wind. Gray light pressed against the windows but didn't quite get in. The world beyond felt far away. Inside, the kettle began to rattle gently on the stove. 2 mugs of spiced cider sat on the counter, untouched. The steam had thinned. Russell glanced at them but said nothing. Lydia followed his eyes. I thought cider might help, she said, turning off the flame. It always helped me during long days. He nodded but didn't move to take a mug. Instead, his gaze wandered to the piano in the corner of the living room. Dust lay thick on the keys. A metronome stood beside it like a soldier who'd been left on guard too long. I used to teach, Lydia said, following his glance. Not anymore. Hands don't move like they used to. Russell looked down. Do they hurt? No, she replied, softly. They remember. She moved to the dining table and pulled out a folder already resting there, her motions practiced, restrained. Russell approached, drawing the chair back slowly. Inside the folder were screenshots, text messages, travel receipts, photos of credit card statements. They were organized by month. June. July. September. A paper trail no one wanted to find but once discovered, couldn't unsee. She booked a room in Killington last month. Said she was on a wellness retreat. Lydia's voice was flat. Dean left me a bottle of wine and a note that said, "See you Sunday. Love you." It used to mean something. Russell leaned forward, scanning the text thread on one of the pages. "Can't wait to see you in that red coat again." Another, "You smell like sin and cinnamon." He winced. She saw it. "Cinnamon?" he asked. Lydia raised an eyebrow. She wore a body mist I'd thrown out years ago. Said it made her feel younger. She tapped the photo. "That mist was a gift from me. A cheap one." He nodded slowly. "Vanessa never liked cinnamon. Until now." Lydia slid over a small, folded note. It was yellowed, written in blocky handwriting. T. Colt, $60,000, December. Russell's brow furrowed. "Who's Colt?" Lydia looked at him carefully. Dean had a small metal box in his closet. "I found this wedged under it. He's mentioned the name once or twice. Travis Colt. I think it's connected to the crypto stuff." Russell leaned back. "Dean told me about investors once. Real vague. Said some guys were building a future. Sounded like a scam with a LinkedIn profile." Lydia nodded. 60,000 isn't love money. That's hush money. Or debt." They were both quiet for a moment. From the other room, a soft thud. Lydia's cat, a large gray tabby with a scarred ear, trotted in and leapt up into Russell's lap without hesitation. He tensed, but the cat purred and settled in, curling its tail across his wrist. "That's Dusty," she said. "Used to hate men. You must be different." Russell gave the cat a gentle scratch behind the ears. "I'm not sure I'm anything anymore." They sat like that for a while. The cider had gone cold, the clock ticked on, and the radio murmured low from the kitchen. Jim Reeves was singing something distant and solemn. "He'll have to go," a voice from another time, asking for answers no one could give. "What do you want to do?" Lydia finally asked. Russell's voice came out low. "Truth. No scenes. No screaming in lobbies. Just, let the truth do its work." She nodded. "Dean thinks he's untouchable. Vanessa hides behind her smile. But truth?" She leaned forward. "Truth doesn't need to shout." Russell felt something shift in the air between them, an understanding, maybe even respect. For a long time, he thought the silence around betrayal was what made it so heavy. But here, in the presence of someone who had carried it longer than he had, it became something else, fuel. Lydia reached for her phone and typed a short message. She showed it to him before pressing send. "Need favor. Friday. Backroom. Leo?" Russell asked. "Bartender at the Velvet Room. Hates Dean. Said he'd leave the room unlocked if I ever needed it." Russell didn't ask more. He just nodded. From the window, they could see Graham Ellis across the street, bent over a cluster of mums on his porch. The old man straightened, caught Russell's eye, and gave a subtle nod, half a greeting, half something else. A gesture of someone who's seen things unravel before. Lydia folded the folder shut. "Once we do this, there's no going back. They'll know." Russell looked down at the cat still resting on him, then back at her. "I don't want to go back." Lydia's eyes met his. Steady, but not hard. She stood, reached for the mugs, and dumped their untouched cider down the sink. "After this," she said, not turning, "we won't be able to unring the bell." In the footage, Vanessa laughed. Dean leaned in. Somewhere across town, Russell stirred his coffee and didn't blink. The cafe by the riverside had already dimmed its lights for the evening, save for the glow of vintage sconces above each booth. It was nearly closing time. The only other patrons were an older couple seated by the jukebox, murmuring over their empty cups. A faded Glenn Campbell song warbled through the static, something about love fading like an old photograph. Russell sat by the window, his flannel coat folded neatly beside him. Across from him, Lydia slowly unwrapped a slice of pumpkin pie, placed carefully on a plate she had brought from home. She didn't touch it. Neither did he. Outside, fog crept across the surface of the river, blurring the far bank into suggestion. The street lamp by the cafe entrance buzzed faintly. Russell checked his phone once. A single missed call. Vanessa. 9:37 p.m. He didn't return it. His thumb hovered over the screen before pressing the button to power it off completely. The world would wait. Back at the Velvet Room, Leo moved quickly and quietly, slipping through the crowd with the practiced anonymity of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. He entered the back room 5 minutes before the agreed time and ensured the small camera tucked into the shelf molding was active, time-stamped, synced, audio clear. The red velvet couch sat empty in the half-light, its shadow long against the floor. At 9:44 p.m., the door opened. Vanessa entered first, red coat slung casually over one shoulder, her black dress clinging to her like memory. She laughed at something unseen, a sound high and easy. Dean followed, wearing the same bomber jacket from the footage Russell had already memorized. They moved like they had a private soundtrack no one else could hear. No urgency, no fear. God, I needed tonight, Vanessa said, tossing her bag onto the side table. This week's been insane. Dean moved in close. You're my calm, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. Leo, watching from the bar, sipped his soda and kept one eye on the laptop screen feeding from the camera. He didn't smile. Just ensured the backup drive recorded every second. The camera caught it all, every touch, every word. The betrayal wasn't shocking anymore. But the intimacy was. At the cafe, Lydia glanced up from her tea and slid an envelope across the table. Russell opened it, revealing the USB drive inside, plain, silver, unmarked. On the front of the envelope, written in careful script, just truth. He nodded, then slid it into his coat pocket. Lydia reached into her bag again, this time producing her phone. She held up the screen so he could see the still image, Vanessa, mid-laugh, Dean's hand on her hip. No caption. No hashtags. No anger. She tapped post. Then, without a word, returned the phone to her coat. Across the city, notifications pinged. Devices lit up. Within the hour, the photo made its way through local circles, Branford Hollow's version of going viral. A local influencer. A known gym coach. A scandal in soft focus. Somewhere in between bites of lukewarm pizza, a college student retweeted it with the caption, "Damn, Vanessa B. Wilding." Someone else replied with a screenshot from an old sponsorship ad, "Guess cinnamon wasn't the only spice in her life." By midnight, one of Vanessa's smaller sponsors issued a quiet statement. The brand was reevaluating its partnerships to align with values of trust and integrity. Dean's gym Yelp page, once filled with glowing praise about his motivational style, was hit with a flood of one-star reviews. Some cited ethics. Others simply said, "Red coat energy." At home, Russell fed Dusty a scoop of the dog's favorite dry mix and refilled his water bowl. The old retriever wagged once, then curled up near the fire, nose tucked under one paw. He didn't feel triumphant. Only clean. Like something heavy had been peeled off his skin. On the table beside him, the cassette player still held his mother's tape. He pressed play again. Her voice, soft with time and tape grain, filled the room. Sometimes, dignity is the only thing left worth keeping. He didn't cry. Not this time. When he rose to go to bed, the house felt stiller than usual, but not empty. The next morning, frost limned the edges of the porch. Russell stepped outside to collect the paper and found something else waiting. A plain envelope, no postage. Slid under the door. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single photo, himself, seated in the riverside cafe the night before, looking out the window. The angle was distant but deliberate, taken through glass, focused, composed. On the back, written in red pen. "You watched." So did I. The bird on the porch wasn't sleeping. Its neck twisted. A feather stuck to the door with scotch tape. Russell crouched slowly, the cold porch seeping through his flannel pants. The bird was a starling. Small. Broken. The kind that never flew alone unless pushed. Its eyes were still open. His gaze lifted to the taped feather. Beneath it, an envelope. No name. Just a red line drawn across the front. He took it inside before the wind could carry it away. The kitchen was still warm from the overnight radiator hum. Russell laid the envelope flat on the table, beside the same chipped mug he'd used nearly every day for 2 decades. He didn't open it immediately. Just stared. Jean Harrow's voice echoed from memory, low and scratchy from the last time they'd been shoulder to shoulder on a job site. The ones who don't raise their voice. They're the ones who hit hardest. Russell had laughed then. He wasn't laughing now. He slit the envelope with the butter knife. Inside, a photo, familiar faces, taken from a street camera, time-stamped. Lydia stepping out of her cottage. Himself, parking at B.A.'s Beans. Dean, blurred in the background, looking over his shoulder. On the back of the photo, a single sentence in typewriter font. "You started the story. You won't write the ending." He stood there for a long time, the cold creeping into his bones in a way that had nothing to do with weather. Across town, Lydia's driveway bore fresh tire tracks, 2 wide arcs gouged into the pristine snow. No one came or went in Branford Hollow without being seen. This morning, no one saw her leave. Russell called her. She answered after 1 ring. "I know," she said. "Where are you?" "Halfway to Boston. My son's meeting me halfway." "Russell," she paused. "I should have told you sooner." "Told me what?" "Dean conned someone. Years ago. A man named Travis Colt. $60,000. Some fake investment scheme. Crypto, mostly. Travis went to prison after trying to extort it back." Russell's grip tightened around the phone. "He was released last spring," Lydia continued. "I thought he'd moved on. Until I found that note in Dean's drawer. Until the photo under your door." Russell moved to his study. Dusty followed, tail down, head low. He shut the door behind them, lowered himself into the chair. "I have to call Jean," he said. Jean Harrow answered on the second ring. His voice was still gravel and patience. "Been a while, Russ. I need a check on someone. Travis Colt." Jean didn't ask why. "Give me an hour." Russell waited with the cassette player resting near his knee. He didn't play it. Not yet. When Jean called back, his voice was lower. "I've been tracking names tied to Colt since August. 2 of them? People Dean worked with. One's missing. The other's last known location was a rest stop in upstate New York. Surveillance caught him looking over his shoulder. Then nothing." Russell leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "He's watching us." "No doubt. He left a dead bird on my porch." "Then it's already too far gone, Russ. You need to go quiet." Russell hung up and dialed Lydia again. She answered breathless, sounds of packing in the background. "We need to disappear," he said. "Tonight." There was a pause. Then, already packing. In the silence that followed, Dusty jumped onto the couch, something he hadn't done in years, and laid his head on Russell's lap. From across the street, Graham Ellis stood motionless on his porch, watering a flower pot with nothing in it. When Russell looked up, Graham lifted one hand, slow and knowing. No wave. Just a gesture. As if he'd seen this kind of end before. The sun never quite rose that day. The light stayed low, dragging long shadows across the lawn. Russell packed a single bag, some clothes, a photo, the cassette tape. Then, from the drawer by his desk, he retrieved the USB. He wrapped it in an old handkerchief, folded it into a shirt, and zipped it away. The voicemail came at 3:18 p.m. A voice, unfamiliar, male, raspy, amused. You think justice is quiet. You think your silence protects you. But Russ, the storm started the moment you hit record. Russell didn't answer. He powered down the phone and slid it into the junk drawer beside old batteries and expired coupons. Before locking the front door for what might be the last time, he sat on the floor, Dusty beside him. The cassette player clicked as he pressed play. His mother's voice drifted into the room, soft and steady, like a fire long gone but still warm. Don't carry fire into silence, Russ. Let it end with you. A powerful short story about betrayal, quiet revenge, and personal rebirth. My wife danced with her lover, woke up broken. He fought for life. I smiled. My revenge was a masterpiece. Follows Russell, a quiet man who uncovers his wife's affair and chooses truth over violence. Set in a small American town, this emotional fiction drama captures the journey from heartbreak to dignity. Perfect for fans of storytime betrayal, cheating wife revenge, emotional storytelling, and quiet justice. Watch how one man turned pain into power. Keywords: storytime, cheating wife, revenge, short story, emotional fiction, story about betrayal, husband finds out affair, wife affair story, YouTube short story drama, cheating caught story.